All right. Well, hello and welcome.
Hi,
This is the Xylem Group. My name is Linda Stier,
I'm
and
John Bruce.
and John Bruce is joining us in our discussion and interview. I'm going to be interviewing John regarding something that is likely something that people deal with in most any meetings, but particularly what we're here for is with regard to boards of directors, whether a nonprofit situation primarily for this discussion, but obviously boards exist from the legislative level to publicly held companies. And if you're an organization, you are likely have a board of directors. And what we're dealing with is difficult situations. So this comprises a wide berth of difficult issues that might arise from someone having great intentions and wanting to pursue their point of view, which may not be in agreement with other people, to people who might have maybe not such a good intention or dominating the situation or difficult personalities. So I just want to start off, first of all, John, with your wide experience of being on boards and your awareness of boards. What would you say would be the most prevalent issue that boards might deal with that you could term a difficult situation to deal with?
I think there's three that spring to mind, Linda. One is people not being prepared, and therefore forcing the board almost to weary its way through papers that have been sent out in advance and should have been studied. The second is two experts speaking in Martian. Usually the accountant who's from outside the organisation and the organisation's finance director. They get into a huddle and speak in tongues and no one understands what in God's name they're speaking about. But they seem to think it's kind of quite important that they have this conversation. And the third thing, recurrent thing, I think, is people being in the room but not in the room. Their mind is on a text they've just received because their phone is on. They don't see this particular item of relevance to them, so their mind wanders or they start reading something else. And those, I think, are general matters of discipline, just general board discipline, which it's easy to get into because these are quite often things that habits that we would fall into in normal, routine, daily meetings. But a board meeting is not a normal, routine, daily meeting. And the sooner members of the board realise that and get the fact that it's different discipline, the greater the chance of success. So those are my three catch-alls anyway, Linda.
Oh, that's excellent inside the overall view of discipline. Now, don't have your video up. I mean, we'll continue to go with the interview. I'm not sure about our connection, but
you can't see
so
me.
Are you seeing me?
Yes, I can see you. Yeah.
Okay. You're breaking up just slightly. So, well, it might just be me because I'm hearing from someone in the chat field that they can see you fine. So,
yeah.
Awesome. I'm just going to relate to you as I'm seeing you too, John. So given these three areas, anything you can offer regarding how to address that at the board level? Because obviously all three of them leave not everybody involved with what's going on with the discussion and perhaps the whole board's work not being efficiently accomplished. How do you see addressing those areas?
It's I suppose for me it begins with what authority does the chair have to do anything about it. It's not a time to express necessarily that you're irritated that someone is late or someone hasn't paid attention and so on, because that's a bit self-indulgent unless it's the fourth time today. But there is a a matter of expecting people to understand what their role is and to have taken whatever action you should as chair to ensure that people understand their role and understand how the board operates. So, for example, I recall a governor. This was a college board that I chaired for a number of years. One particular governor, who was an industry representative, kept wanting to bring industry business onto the agenda, but he wouldn't put it on the agenda. He would try and slip it in during the meeting. And I get a tad irritated with somebody not dancing to the tune that we're all supposed to be dancing to. So I would say to him, you're most welcome to bring it to the board. We'll put it on the next agenda if you want to. Oh, no, that's all right, he would say. And then we would do the same dance at the next meeting. He eventually resigned because he felt that he was being ignored. But there is such a thing as you do things properly or you don't do them. And I'm a bit of a stickler for them being done properly. Little point in having rules to ignore unless there are particular circumstances. And there were no circumstances there. He felt that his industry was being marginalised, so he was speaking very much from the point of view of his own interest. And if he wanted the board to discuss how his industry was or was not being dealt with by the college, he needed to arrange for it to be put on the agenda. I wasn't going to put it on the agenda because I wouldn't know what he wanted on the agenda. He would have to provide some kind of information that would enable a sensible item to be posted on the agenda. And he didn't. So in the end, he resigned, which was a bit of a pity, although I have to say his contribution was not sadly missed, I'm afraid.
The interesting thing, first of all, I think an important thing to note out of what you were just saying, first of all, that there's clarity of roles to begin with. So you can address a number of discipline issues from a clarity of roles. But then here was someone where you had roles of engagement and someone chose not to take. How else do you see that you might have engaged him, or, if someone's not wanting to engage, how might you address that?
I could have been kinder to him earlier on and taken him aside following a meeting and see if we could have a bit of time together to discuss it. And so that was a failure on my part, I think, for not doing that. So
as far as taking someone aside and sort of creating it that way versus,
yes.
For no rules or him. There's a great comment from Robert in the chat field about, liking a group to approve agenda at the outset. So it's clear, that's clear. And then let me just say the other thing is that it's the chair's job to coach board members. So we can address that in a moment. But you had a comment to approving the agenda.
I'm not necessarily sure that I want the group to approve the agenda, because they might want to approve some of it, not necessarily all of it. But we need the group to own the fact that the agenda is the board's and therefore it is theirs. So I might be saying the same thing as Robert's getting at. What I used to do in my latter years as a chair, we would always circulate an agenda for people to add to or ask questions about, so that by the time it was formally issued before the meeting, everyone had an opportunity to suggest things, ask questions about things as they wanted. And that seemed to kind of, it seemed a reasonable way of operating. And if people were particularly concerned, then they need to pick up the phone and have a conversation. And if I, as chair, am particularly unapproachable, then of course that won't happen, will it? So trying to make sure. I mean, Robert's second point about the chair's job to coach board members. I think the chair owes it to board members to understand what the chair's role is and how you as chair particularly see it working. It's not fair for them to be put in a situation where they're trying to read your mind or to guess what's supposed to be done. And it's not in your interest to make that happen either. Chairs can have, in a sense, a lot of power, and they have to be prepared, I think, to recognise that that power has no value whatsoever if it's not power given to you by the board. It's not power you can take. It's only power that you have with the board's agreement. So if I as chair am being particularly difficult with someone because I think they're being particularly difficult, it's not necessarily a way out of things. I also found it quite helpful to have another director on the board who could bring a different perspective and could maybe marry up some of the difficulties that seemed to be going on. Maybe I wasn't listening properly, maybe the other person wasn't listening properly, and we're all human. But so it's useful to have someone who can see things from a slightly cooler perspective if the temperature is rising a bit.
So it seems that really having board members, everybody owning the process, right? Not just the board chair needing to be the one to do it, but if everybody's empowered, then you can bring the strengths of other board members to bear on whatever situation needs to get dealt with. Is that what you're speaking to?
Yes.
It's an excellent point. You know, I think about this one aspect that the people not paying attention, which may not necessarily be obvious, or it may be obvious to people, but people checking emails, you know, they're there and they're quite seeming as if they're engaged in the discussion, but you know that they're, you know, there's lights on, but nobody's home with regards to the discussion at hand. Anything with regards to any way that you've seen that being addressed?
Private word afterwards. I have previously, on at least one occasion, walked round the board table to the person who was on their BlackBerry. It was a few years ago now, when BlackBerries were owned by everyone, and asked if you would mind being in the room, please, not someplace else. And she looked suitably embarrassed. I can't remember if she did it again. She probably did, but it kind of makes a point for the whole board. And I think equally, if others in the board know that someone is doing it, they also get a bit concerned. And yet they may find it quite difficult to do something about it because they may feel it's the chair's job. Which I've always thought was a bit unkind, but particularly if the chair doesn't know about it, the chair can't do anything about it. So there might be some expectations there around the board table about how it's everybody's role to help the meeting go well. And that has to include trying to make sure that people are working in a disciplined way. If they're snoring, Robert says, they're not likely to be paying attention. Yes, as long as it's not too loud that it disturbs the meeting, I'd be content to let them keep sleeping and then assign an action to them and then thank them for attending. And then they've got the anxiety of wondering what on earth they were agreed to. I think that's the kind of conspiracy that everyone supports. If someone is genuinely tired, I would ask them if they'd like a bit of time out. It's also quite appropriate for the board just to take 5. Indeed, there's been a bit recently in the UK about it's good for your health to stand up for a few minutes at least every hour. And if you're into long board meetings, I in my early years as a chair thought that we had to complete the meeting in one sitting, and it was only some years along that one of the board members asked if comfort breaks were allowed that I realised how completely insensitive I'd been to the fact that my bladder was stronger than most other people's. I have to say it's not now, but it was then. So there's something about what things can you do to provide a bit of space so that if you say let's stretch our legs, let's take a 5-minute comfort break, it also provides an opportunity to maybe have a very quick word with someone who may be struggling for some reason or another.
I think that's so great. Just really actually attending to people's personal needs and what do they need to stay mentally active to be in the discussion. That's
Yes.
a
Yes.
very valuable point. Well, I see there's one more question in the chat field, and then I just love this engaging discussion, but I want to begin to wrap us up here. This is just a short segment, but Robert's asking, what about people who always arrive late?
I, as a matter of habit, would never wait for anyone unless I had a message that someone was going to be 5 minutes late, in which case I would think we could wait 5 minutes. Otherwise, you have no idea if someone's going to arrive at all unless you've heard something that's helpful. It may be that if there's it's the usual problem of lateness at work. If it's a persistent problem, could we start the meeting a few minutes later if they've got buses or trains to catch or something like that? But if it's just I couldn't be bothered or I overslept or stuff like that, I think you've got to ask them whether they're serious about being on the board.
Yeah, that this is a meeting that's important to be at and to be on time.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, John, this has been very enlightening. I really appreciate you bringing your expertise to this discussion. There's likely more that we could create about this, but for now, this is today's Xylem Group interview on dealing with difficult situations on the board. So, John, thank you very much for joining us.
Most welcome.
And I would say to everyone, thank you to everyone who's joined in the chat field, and look for our next episode of the Xylem Group talking about board and board governance. So that's it for today. Thank you.